In the previous lesson, we saw how we can work with more precision using the grids and using the rulers, using the guide, using title action save. So we also saw how we can customize this through the preference panel, and how we can customize also the interface, how we can save the interface. So we are continuing here to explore After Effects little by little. We started with the project panel, then we moved more in the composition. We also talk about the layer panel and the footage panel, which looks really similar, but they are slightly different. We also saw how we can navigate and how we can explore also in the composition, and how we can nest a composition into another composition, so we can do like a hierarchy. And so we explore a lot of different panels. Now in this video, we're going to continue, of course, with the project panel and with the composition, but we'll also explore the timeline panel a little bit more. So let's get started here with a new file. So I'm going to create a new project for the new lesson. So I'm going to call this lesson 7, and let's get started. Now, as usual, we need to start with the composition. So we can start from here, we can start from here, depending on what we're going to do. We're not going to import from footage. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to create a new with a preset of Full HD 24 FPS. And I'm going to call this, let's call this like timeline and layers. And this is going to be the composition right here, which is empty right now. And let's get started with the layer menu. Now in the layer menu, if we don't have any layers yet, as you can see here, the timeline is totally empty. It's going to be mostly grayed out, so we cannot select all of these properties here, commands or anything. We can just create a new layer. But this is really interesting. Let's see what's gonna be in here. So we have the text layer. So the text in After Effects is a specific type of layer. And then we have solid. And then we have also layers that are good for 3D, like light, camera, or we can also use null objects for either for 2D or 3D. And then we have shape layers, like for vector graphics, adjustment layers for adjustment of the color correction, and so on. And also content aware fill layer, Photoshop file, and again, a 3D file here from Cinema 4D. So we have a lot of options, but we're gonna explore more later the others. So I wanna show you here the solid first, which is kind of the simplest. So if I use the solid settings here, you can see this is gonna be a standard background with one single color. So let's call these like blue. And if you go here, you can set up the dimensions. So you can see it's getting the dimensions from the Full HD. So let's change this into something else. Let's make it like 600 pixels, 400 pixel height. Units will be pixels, but you can change this if you want. And we're gonna keep the square pixels. And you can also do make comp size, so it's gonna get it back to the composition size. But I'm gonna use here for 600, 400. And then color, I want to pick the color here from the interface. Let's get this blue right here, and let's say okay. So this will be the solid composition. So this is made out of pixels. It's not a vector graphics. We're going to see also later the difference between working with the raster graphics and vector graphics. But essentially, this area here of the toolbar, these are vector graphics, including the text. Now, essentially, if you continue to scale this up, eventually you're going to see some pixels. This is what's happening with the raster. With the vector, you will never experience that, so you can scale to any size you want. Now let's also create another layer. So I'm going to go to layer, new, and also create a text. And I'm going to type here After Effects. And I can use the caps lock if I want to do everything capital letter. So After Effects. And if I want to place this into the middle, I can see here I have the paragraph now. So depending on what you do, you're probably going to see appearing here different panels. So you have the text, you have the paragraph. In the text, you can also change the font. And you can also display these bigger and smaller if you set up the references correctly. Now, I need to click and drag with the left mouse to underline this in order to change the font. So we're going to talk later on more about the text. I'm just gonna quickly increase here by clicking and dragging with the left mouse. I'm gonna increase the size, and then we're gonna get back to the text later. Now you can always use the title action save to make sure that your text or title or wherever gonna go inside that save area. And then once we finished, we have our two first layers. Now I will change the fill also of this so we can see this a little better. Let's make it also blue. And let's use the selection tool up here so that we can start to move things around. Now, if you don't see anything here, it's probably because you have caps lock. Now, caps lock, once you are outside the text, means that you're gonna see the wireframe. And that's something we saw about the composition. We don't want to see that. We want to see everything. So be careful about the caps lock. Now, if I click and drag this around, you can see is not happening much about like alignment and things like that. Now, to make sure things get aligned, you need to hold Control, click and drag, and you can see that things now get aligned. So I can align these text perfectly in the middle here, horizontally and vertically to the composition. Now, you can do that also every time, or you can leave that option on if you go up here and turn on the snapping. Now, to snap means that this is now going to be the standard. So if I move around, this text is going to eventually snap to something, either another layer or a composition or another guide or whatever you are using for snapping. Now, you can also use the snap along edges. So if let me just scroll with the scroll wheel a little bit, I'm gonna zoom out. And if I click this and, or the, well, depending what you wanna move, I don't wanna move the rectangle here. So I click on the text, and now I can click and drag the text. So you can see if I move far from that rectangle, it's still gonna use it as a snapping object, thanks to those dashed lines, which represent this one here. So if you don't have that, you can only snap if you are near that object. So depending what you need to do, you can turn on and off these snaps. Now, also an interesting thing about the snap is that if you go closer to this little square, we can call this like grip. So if I click on that little square or grip and can click and drag with my left mouse, I'm going to change the dimensions. So changing the scale, you can see here on the right side, we have this panel, which is a scale. So I am changing the width and the height. If I hold shift, again, it's going to maintain the proportion. But what I want to show you here actually is not this, but how we can, well, let me make this like this. Okay. And so if you get not over that, but near that and click, it's going to take that as a snapping point. So you can use the snap from a corner, you can use a snap from the middle, you can use the pivot as a snapping point to perfectly, align in both direction. And of course, you can use the alignment and distribution as we already talked about previously, but you can do that with all the layers. So you have different combination here. And if you're tired of using snap, you're going to turn it off. And you can also use the control key to inverse temporarily what you're doing, the behavior. So if you're snapping, if you hold control, you're gonna deactivate temporarily the snapping, and vice versa. If you turn this off, you need to hold control to use the snap. If I select the text here, and let me make this brighter so we can see it better, you can also click and drag and transform the text as it was like another, infographic or another raster graphics that you have, in your composition. Let's go back again to the layer menu. And by the way, also in the composition panel, we have some interesting things we're gonna see later on. So we're gonna go like increasing the level little by little. So I don't want to show you here about the mask yet. And the quality, well, this is, again, what we saw before. So, but we can do this layer by layer. So we can do wireframe, or we can use like a bass or draft for this layer. So if you want to like increase the performance, you can change those and make it like draft.